In the Arcadia Empire, there is a noble lineage of swordsmen called House Cardenas. Within this family are 7 orders of knights, each as powerful as a nation, and even before they are born, they are known as golden dragons. As such, the direct descendants are born with golden hair and eyes, because they have dragon's blood. When their blood awakens, they become young dragons ready for battle. The direct lineage possesses supernatural powers called traits, because of the purity of their blood. To test their strength, they all train on the family's special training grounds. Right now, we see a boy with golden hair who looks very confident in the middle of his training. Suddenly, he engages in combat with a blonde girl, and the two seem to be on the same level. After defending himself, the young man stands still, calmly analyzing the situation. The girl, however, doesn't seem happy about this at all and gets very irritated. Meanwhile, somewhere else, someone is watching and says that 2 against 1 would be difficult, even for number 1. But to the spectator's surprise, number 4 was defeated in the blink of an eye. With that, the girl prepares for her next attack, holding her sword with all her might. Then, a powerful and swift attack is launched in the combatant's direction. The young woman can barely believe what she's seeing, and her eyes widen in shock. The young man's attack is so fast that she can't read his movements and is struck. Lying on the ground, she wonders how direct descendants can be defeated so easily. The blonde boy then looks down on her with contempt, saying she's nowhere near his level. He even says she is weak and no different from the trash of the Branch family. With that, the young man declares that the combat is over and that he is the winner of this selection. The scene then changes to the knightly order, headquarters of the Cardenas family. Inside, some knights are observing the results on a magic screen, and this is Sword Master Pabian, who wonders who will be worthy of the special class. A subordinate replies that despite the talents, there is only one qualified, number 1, William Cardenas. William defeated numbers 2 and 4, and now takes their insignias as proof of victory. The master is surprised and asks if number 2 wasn't a direct descendant, and his subordinate confirms it. As for the other test participants, they were almost all taken out by William. The members of the Branch family were almost all eliminated, leaving only a few direct squads. Pabian then says that the bloodline barrier hasn't been broken, since a lower number means more strength. The numbering shows that participant 1 is the strongest among all the rookies in the test. The Sword Master then comments that number 1 should be in the special class, but this time it's different. With that, the subordinate is about to name William for the special class when he is interrupted. A man with a blonde beard asks them to observe a little longer, and the master asks for the reason. He explains that there is still one descendant from the Branch family left, and it would be better to wait and judge him. When asked about the number, the man reveals that it is participant 25. Pabian says that even among the collateral lines, some manage to stand out, so he must be good. But another man says not to expect much from him, although he still has some hope. Pabian, however, trusts the head instructor, as he knows there must be a good reason for this. At that moment, the instructor reveals that number 25's name is Leonard Cardenas. He says that a few days ago, the young man began to stand out and defeated everyone in his path. The subordinate is shocked to learn that the young man went from number 301 to 25. The instructor then tells him to look at the monitor, so he doesn't miss what's happening. The screen then shows the one-on-one duel that is about to happen between the 2 participants. The blonde boy scoffs at the young man, saying he's brave for coming alone, but that he won't go easy on him. Leonard just replies that's good, because he doesn't intend to go easy in the fight either. The young man's eyes then turn red as he stares seriously at his opponent. Angrily, number 1 unleashes his aura and calls his adversary insignificant trash. He then yells for Leonard to draw his sword, because he will regret ever challenging him. The red-haired young man observes number 1 and notices that his presence is completely different. With a smirk, he thinks, "Let's do this," and prepares for the battle to come. Leonard then tells his opponent to show him what he's got, because he will make him regret it too. He then thinks that this is his chance to see how far he can go with his current strength. At that moment, he charges at high speed toward his waiting adversary. William then leaps into the air to perform a powerful downward attack. Furious, number 1 charges, shouting that he will crush his opponent along with his wooden sword. The screen fills with energy as the two training swords are about to clash. Number 1 is shocked to see the strength of his opponent's attack, which seems to be superior. With the impact of the wooden swords, a great shockwave is created between the two, and after the clash of blows, William is sent flying backward, completely defeated. Leonard stares at his broken wooden sword, not understanding how that happened. Meanwhile, William is furious because his weapon shouldn't have been broken by a mere rookie. He then yells that his opponent is mocking him and unleashes a powerful blue aura. With that, the two resume fighting with incredible speed, exchanging fierce blows. Leonard masterfully defends against a golden attack, showing his great skill. Even with William's furious attacks, number 25 remains calm and dodges everything. Watching the fight, one of the instructors notes that Leonard's style isn't that of the Cardenas family, but he is impressed by the young man's movements, as there is no wasted energy. On top of that, the young man is blocking everything with minimal force and hasn't even truly attacked yet. William gets irritated with his adversary's evasiveness and yells for him to stop running from the fight. Number 1 then angrily asks if all his opponent knows how to do is run around the arena. He then launches a powerful spinning attack, but Leonard manages to dodge it at the last second. The redhead dodges with agility and prepares his counterattack with a determined look. He then plants his feet on the ground and prepares to finally return his opponent's blows. Leonard then unleashes his own golden aura and charges forward with a devastating attack. William can't believe his opponent's strength and is completely surrounded by blue energy. The two auras collide, creating an explosion of power that lights up the entire forest. At that moment, Leonard uses his sword to deflect number 1's blow with great precision. He then walks calmly, acknowledging that his adversary's strength is real. William gets even more irritated and accuses the young man of just talking while only dodging. Number 1 demands that he fight seriously, but the protagonist seems to be just warming up. Leonard then leaps backward, gaining distance and preparing for his next move. He realizes that his opponent not only has power, but also sharp judgment in battle. William prepares for a decisive attack, while thinking about how to defeat the Black Dragon. Meanwhile, Leonard thinks that what he lacks are instincts forged in the heat of battle. He recognizes that being just an elite trainee is still a limit to his true potential. In a clash of flaming auras, William declares that this is Leonard's limit. But in the next instant, number 1's eyes fill with astonishment and disbelief. Leonard jumps over William and lands a powerful blow that catches him by surprise. The other rookies watch in shock, unable to believe that number 25 is fighting on equal terms. The other rookies are shocked because he seems like a completely different person. With a focused gaze, the young man prepares to end the combat once and for all. He then runs with impressive speed, disappearing from his adversary's sight. Number 1 panics as he has lost sight of his opponent and doesn't know where he is. Suddenly, Leonard appears from behind, ready to deliver the final blow to William. The blonde boy can't believe that a member of the Branch family is so powerful. With a cold gaze, Leonard firmly declares that number 1 has lost the battle. A devastating final blow then sends William flying, ending the fight. Utterly defeated, number 1 falls to the ground with no strength to get up. The winner then thinks that with his former self, achieving this victory would have been impossible, but now he remembers everything, as his memories have finally returned completely. He recalls his past life as Len, the greatest sword emperor that ever existed. He remembers his life as Ren, the man who walked the path of the sword to become the strongest. In his past life, he split the heavens and reached a realm capable of shattering mountains. With this, he earned the title of Sword Emperor, using only his own strength. But even with all that power, he still felt unsatisfied and challenged the heavenly demon. The battle between the two lasted for days, and its intensity completely transcended human limits. The combat was so fierce that it's said to have redrawn the map of that region, and the outcome of that epic showdown wasn't what the swordsman had hoped for. In the end, The heavenly demon was the one left standing amidst a scene of total devastation. Defeated, Ren doesn't understand, as his swordsmanship should have been absolutely perfect. He then questions why his sword couldn't even scratch his opponent. With a smile, the heavenly demon replies that the problem lies in the fundamentals. He explains that Ren never truly understood the sword and praises his courage for challenging him. However, his inexperience in neglecting the basics became his fatal flaw in the end. The swordsman then reflects on lacking the basics, calling it a cliché insult. The demon then says that for a mere stray dog to challenge him and fight so hard was magnificent. He then declares that Ren's legend will end there in a total defeat. Finally, the victor offers his respect and tells the Sword Emperor to rest in peace. In that moment, he thinks about how he was known to all as the Sword Emperor, and even with all his power, he can't believe it all ended so easily. His last wish was just one more chance to try everything all over again. The swordsman wonders if his blade would reach its target, and so, the legend of the Sword Emperor came to an end. In that moment, however, a new legend was about to begin where no one would ever imagine. Back in the present, our protagonist suddenly awakens with a big scare. Sitting on the ground, the boy is completely bewildered, not understanding the situation. He realizes he had that dream again, while a trainee notices the blonde boy is alive. The other trainees approach, and one of them comments that he thought the blonde boy was done for. However, one of the bullies notices that something seems different in our protagonist's eyes. One of the attackers then decides to keep roughing him up and throws a punch at the blonde boy's face. In that instant, however, the boy's gaze changes, becoming completely focused and serious. To the attacker's surprise, the protagonist manages to stop the blow with just one of his hands. The attacker is completely shocked, unable to believe his attack was stopped. His companions are also astonished and can't believe he managed to block the punch. The protagonist himself is surprised, as his body moved on its own out of pure instinct. With surprising strength, he squeezes the attacker's fist, leaving him unable to react. The bully starts to get annoyed with the boy's attitude and tries to break free from his grip. Furious, the attacker grabs a wooden sword and tells the boy not to get cocky. He then attacks with all his might, saying the protagonist just got lucky. But the protagonist dodges the strike with impressive and effortless agility. The attacker's eyes go wide, and he can't believe he dodged the attack again. Once more, the boy realizes his body is moving completely on its own. It's almost as if an unknown force is guiding all of his combat movements. With a swift and precise move, he counterattacks and knocks the bully to the ground. He is now absolutely certain that something is guiding his movements. The others realize it wasn't luck and that he's just been toying with them this whole time. The protagonist seems like a different person, as he couldn't even fight back before. One of the bullies yells at his scared friend not to chicken out and to keep fighting. The attacker gets annoyed because this is the same nobody they've been pushing around this whole time. So, the two decide to attack together to finally take the boy down once and for all. With a slight smile on his face, the protagonist finally understands what's happening. He then declares with total confidence that he has finally remembered everything about his past life. With his new memories, the protagonist easily takes down one of the attackers with a kick. He then leaps over the other bully as he prepares to strike. With a quick and precise blow, the blonde boy then knocks out the second attacker. And so, the two bullies are left on the ground, completely defeated by the boy. He then thinks about how he's always had these strange dreams his entire life. They were dreams of a man fighting under a red sky in long robes and with white hair. The young man was so tormented by these dreams that he couldn't focus on his training. But now, he finally understands everything that was happening to him. That man's life and passing are now vividly resurfacing in his mind. He then finally understands that he is the reincarnation of Ren, the Sword Emperor. The boy is shocked, as he can't believe reincarnation is real. At this, he wonders if his desperate wish from his final moments came true. Suddenly, he feels a pang of pain and realizes the weakness of his current body. His arms ache just from swinging the wooden training sword a little. He realizes the pain is a result of having trained the completely wrong way. But from now on, with his memories, he knows exactly what he needs to do. With his new memories and techniques, he promises that he will grow stronger without limits. Ren couldn't do it, but the current Leonard will definitely reach the top. He will use everything at his disposal to become the strongest sword emperor. Meanwhile, inside the Cardenas training camp, 3 individuals are injured. Because of their injuries, they will be completely useless for the field training. One of the students says their combat power will decrease, but it won't be a problem. Then, he mentions that the one who took down the 3 of them was acting alone, and the one responsible was number 381, and it all happened in an instant. The other boy then asks what the numbers of the 3 who were defeated were. The student replies that they were numbers 329, 257, and 133. The boy is surprised, as those are higher numbers than he expected. He gets worried because if someone like that joins another faction, the power balance will shift. At that moment, a hand touches his shoulder, interrupting his thoughts. Number 5 then tells him to watch what he says and not to get worked up over some trash. He then orders the boy to gather some guys and bring number 381 to him. In his memories, a figure says they'll give him a gift for his journey into the afterlife. He reveals that the reason he couldn't advance was because he took too long to create his energy foundation. The opponent says that if his foundation had been built when he was young, the outcome would have been different. With that, he reflects that the fight's result could have been different if he had trained earlier. Back in the present, the boy thinks that this is true, as he is past the ideal age. But now he can build his foundation from a young age, and everything will be different than before. So, the boy decides he will first create a constitution that can handle mana. A large amount of energy gathers around him, forming a pattern on the ground. Upon opening his eyes, he sees his hand glowing with power and realizes he has succeeded. He thinks that even as the world's greatest, at that age, he suffered from a lack of internal power. At this, he wonders about the nature of the Cardenas bloodline to possess so much power. At another moment, the boy is in the cafeteria getting his lunch along with other students. Taking the first bite, the blonde boy realizes the food here is actually very good. He thinks that a balanced diet is important and that he needs to eat without skipping meals. While he's eating, a student approaches from behind and calls him. Number 381. The student says he heard about yesterday's fight and didn't know the boy was such a hafed. He comments that the blonde boy usually eats little but has a big appetite today and has cleaned his plate. The protagonist asks if he is number 8, but the student reveals he is now number 7. The big guy brags about defeating the former number 7, and the blonde boy understands the dueling system. Unfazed by his strength, the protagonist gets straight to the point and asks what he wants. The big guy complains about the boy's coldness, as he was about to tell him something useful. He reveals that the atmosphere is tense, because the strongest are expanding their influence. The boy then rests his hand on the table while listening intently to the explanation. Leonard says he already knows and mentions that they have blonde hair and golden eyes. At this, number 7 gets nervous and asks the blonde boy to be careful so they aren't overheard. The protagonist then loses his patience and tells the other to get straight to the point. Annoyed, the student grinds his teeth at the boy's new personality. He then yells that if they don't team up, they won't survive and asks what the blonde boy plans to do. The big guy reveals that more than half of the 500 students have already joined them. That's why he plans to team up with numbers 3 and 9 and invites the protagonist to join. But the blonde boy immediately refuses, saying he doesn't belong anywhere. He thanks him for the information and leaves, leaving the student behind in shock. Number 7 is confused and wonders if the boy hit his head, as he's not the person he knew. Outside, the protagonist walks alone through the academy's courtyard. Suddenly, he stops and asks if anyone there has business with him. A mysterious voice asks if the food was good as it approaches. 2 students appear, and one says he has a lot to talk about, but there's something more important. The same boy then yells at the blonde boy that number 1 is calling for him. He says he'll forget what happened yesterday, because the boss has taken an interest in him. The protagonist thinks it's all very professional for a bunch of kids playing at being in factions. Unconcerned, the boy says he's not interested and tells the two of them to get lost. Annoyed, one of the bullies calls him worthless and charges at him with his sword. The swift attack heads toward the boy, who remains completely still. With a quick movement, the blonde boy closes in and stops the sword using only his hand. The boy then thinks that this body's physical ability is truly extraordinary. Next, the protagonist counter-attacks with a blow full of red energy. The bully is in shock, unable to believe he was attacked with bare hands. Then, with a precise move, the blonde boy disarms the opponent, sending the sword flying. Without wasting a moment, the protagonist lands a powerful blow to his adversary's chest. The boy notes that the opponent's number is 157 and that he is skilled. With one opponent on the ground, the other prepares to fight while the blonde boy thinks about the Cardina's bloodline. The protagonist then faces the other bully and asks if he still wants to continue the fight. The student refuses to give up and yells at the blonde boy to stop being so full of himself and come fight. With that, the protagonist realizes this new opponent is number 98. Understanding the situation, the boy simply disappears in front of the surprised opponent. He then says he will do as the other wishes and goes in for the final attack. With a single strike, the bully is sent flying hard against the building's wall. Thus, the number 98 badge flies through the air after the defeat. From a broken window, a voice comments that the boy was simply toying with his opponent. The masked observer then wonders if the blonde boy was hiding his strength all along. The protagonist turns toward the window, sensing someone's gaze from far away. At this, the observer is shocked that the boy noticed his presence even from so far away. He is Ol, an observer of the students, and thinks this will be a very interesting event. As he jots something down, he says he will expect great things from number 381. The golden-haired youth then turns and walks away, leaving the fallen opponents behind. Elsewhere, a shout announces that number 98 is heading to the training grounds. A student in a hurry apologizes for bumping into someone and mentions number 98. A blonde girl then asks if number 1 sent him to get number 98. She is number 2, Verita Cardenas, and says she's heard about someone incredible lately. Verita is near the defeated goons and comments that they were high-ranking. Suddenly, another student is sent flying hard in the blonde girl's direction. The protagonist appears and kicks a new opponent, who was telling him to join their squad. Out of patience, the boy says he already refused and asks how many times he'll have to repeat it. With that, he charges at another adversary who wears the number 25 badge. In a swift move, the blonde boy rips the badge from the frightened student's chest. He then holds the badge victoriously while the defeated opponent grumbles on the ground. At this, the girl who is watching the fight from afar begins to slowly approach the boy. She congratulates him on his promotion to number 25 and asks if he knows her. With her golden eye, the girl states that she can see the blonde boy's strange constitution. She notices the unique flow of energy running through the young protagonist's body. She then comments on the number 25 badge the boy is holding in his hand. He realizes her ability is clairvoyance and finds it very interesting. He then understands that this is a powerful ability worthy of number 2. The blonde girl questions why the boy doesn't want to join a group for the training. At that moment, another student appears and tells the girl to be quiet. The newcomer is William Carden as number 1, and he scolds her for talking too much. Meanwhile, the previously defeated student remains on the ground in pain. With a look of contempt, William approaches the fallen goon and calls him trash. The protagonist faces number 1 and notices he has a striking presence. With that, the blonde-haired boy begins to walk toward our hero. Number 1 comes face to face with the young man and says he's finally found him. Unintimidated, the protagonist says he can still fight and challenges him to a duel. At this, number 2 can't contain herself and starts laughing out loud at the situation. The blonde girl comments that he's interesting, as she's never seen anyone talk to William like that. Number 1 says he only came to see the boy and turns to leave with his group. Before leaving, he warns number 25 not to regret his provocation. The protagonist smiles at the threat and thinks about the joint training. He thinks that tomorrow's training will be an event for forming factions. The next day, an instructor in a red cape asks if all the students have arrived. His assistant then confirms that all participants are present at the location. The assistant reports that when it was time to form teams, an unusual student appeared. Senior instructor Bruno then asks him to explain everything in detail. The aide reveals that he is participating alone, and the instructor questions the rules. The field exercise will be conducted in the Great Cardinus Forest. There, they must survive on their own, and there is no limit to team size. With that, the largest group is Squad A, led by the famous number 1. Next, the second largest group is Squad B, led by number 2. Squad C is formed by students who do not have a direct bloodline. As for Squad D, it is led by number 4 and focuses on battle strategy. Finally, Squad E is composed of those who couldn't get into any group. The assistant then prepares to announce the last participant on the list. He announces that Leonard Cardenas, number 25, is by himself. The boy forms Squad F by himself and enters the forest for the training. The protagonist thinks that the training ground is vast and he needs to secure a base. Just then, the instructor approaches and asks if that is all the boy's luggage. He notes that the young man only brought water and crackers and questions if he'll be all right. But the blonde boy knows that this is actually just a competition to steal badges. Suddenly, a voice calls instructor Bruno to talk with number 25. It's number 4, who says that entering the forest alone is very dangerous. With a smile on his face, Dylan Cardenas invites the boy to join his Squad D. Without hesitation, the protagonist tells the other to get lost and says it's none of his business. He thinks the boy is fake and just wants to use him when danger appears. Dylan doesn't understand the refusal and says his offer isn't bad, as the other groups are huge. The blonde boy replies that he doesn't need to understand and that he doesn't want to join his picnic. Number 4 understands why William dislikes him and calls him arrogant. With a fake smile, he says he will convince him by force to gain an advantage. Without wasting time, the leader of Squad D charges at the protagonist. He advances quickly and yells for the boy to join his team right now. With a swift movement, the wooden sword flies toward the golden-haired youth, but Leonard easily dodges the attack, leaving his opponent completely shocked. The boy stomps on the ground hard after dodging his opponent's strike. Dylan is surprised by the blonde boy's strange movement and speed. Then, the protagonist attacks with a powerful blow to the rival's head. He thinks that he didn't sense any malicious intent and wonders if the other is an assassin. With a single blow, number 4 is defeated and falls to the ground, completely defenseless. Suddenly, a hand lands on the young man's shoulder to stop the fight that was starting. The instructor says the moves were good, but the promotion won't be recognized. The golden-haired boy just agrees with the older man's decision. He thinks that he didn't even sense the instructor's presence and that he is incredibly strong. With this, he reflects that even his past self would have had a hard time against that man. Meanwhile, the instructor thinks about the incredible talent of the Cardenas family. He reflects on how the bloodline's prodigies awakened their power very early. At this, he wonders if there is some secret in the bloodline for so many talents. The boy breaks the opponent's wooden sword with a stomp before leaving. With that, he decides to focus on the training and look for an advantageous hiding spot. Back at the camp, Bruno asks for a report on the situation after the start. An assistant informs him that a confrontation happened earlier than expected. Group A Surprise attacked Group C and defeated them in a one-sided battle. The report continues as a student runs desperately through the forest. Except for number 3, who managed to escape, all the others were eliminated. The instructor finds it interesting, as he thought William would use a surprise attack. He thinks that the boy didn't rely solely on the difference in combat strength. Number 1 used his numerical advantage to attack at the beginning of the training. Thus, he broke the common sense approach of securing a base and caught everyone by surprise. Satisfied with the analysis, he then asks for the reports on Groups B and D. The assistant informs him that, knowing their disadvantage, the two groups formed an alliance. The senior instructor thinks it was a wise decision and that they are promising. At this, he turns to instructor Colin and asks for the report on the other groups. The blue-haired instructor gets nervous but agrees to give her report. She reveals that Group E has made no progress since its leader was chosen. The instructor stumbles over her words when talking about number 25 of Group F, but the protagonist calls her by name even though she is hidden. The woman is in shock, as her concealment technique is one of the best. The golden-haired youth turns and says he has a question for her. He had already noticed the instructor's presence watching him from a distance. With that, the woman decides to reveal herself and walks toward the boy. She then appears in front of the young man and asks what his question is. The blonde boy points to a cave and says he wants to use it, but it has an owner. The woman questions if the creature in the cave is a beast tamed by Cardenas. With that, a large blue wolf emerges from the den, and the boy says he didn't want to harm it. She confirms it's a dire wolf, but says it's impossible for a student to defeat it. The instructor thinks about saving him if necessary and wants to see if he's bluffing. The protagonist faces the beast and says that if he defeats it, he can use the cave. With a smile, the woman says yes, but only if he can manage to defeat it. Without wasting time, the dire wolf leaps forcefully toward the young man. The boy gets ready and says that for a pet, it moves well. He attacks the beast and apologizes, but he needs that place to sleep. The wolf lets out a howl of pain as it's hit by the protagonist's blow. The creature falls to the ground, surprised by the force of the unexpected attack. Angrily, the beast snarls, baring its sharp fangs at its adversary. A blue aura envelopes the animal as it prepares for the next attack. The blonde boy senses the hostile intent and realizes the wolf has lost its senses. He thinks that if he hesitates and gets hurt, it will cause trouble for the woman. So, the boy leaps onto the beast. Saying this is going to hurt a little, he dodges the wolf's attack with a quick and precise movement in the air. The creature tries to bite the young man, who holds its mouth shut with one hand. The protagonist thinks that he's not going to let himself be eaten so easily. Next, he lands a powerful blow on the wolf's chest with his sword. The instructor is shocked that he defeated it in an instant without help. She wonders if this is really the strength of a mere student in training. With the cave now free, the protagonist finally has a place to rest. Suddenly, the beast transforms into a cute pup and wags its tail at the boy. Unfazed by the cuteness, the young man points to his badge and tells it to sit. The wolf obeys at once and even rolls on the ground, waiting for more commands. The boy then asks for its paw, and the animal promptly offers it to its new master. With that, he turns to the instructor and asks if he can take the wolf with him in the training. The woman imagines the boy riding the beast and says it would be very difficult to allow that, but she admits that taming it is part of his skills and allows it on one condition. The wolf won't be able to fight but can help with scouting, and the young man accepts the deal. Finally, she asks him not to harm the others, and the boy turns to leave. The blonde boy thinks that the instructor's concealment technique is quite useful. Then he tells his new partner that it's time to look for some real food. Upon finding a fork in the path, the boy decides they should split up for a while. He tells the beast to bring back anything that catches its attention, even if it's not food. With the command given, the two part ways and head in opposite directions in the forest. Elsewhere, a student from Group E is down and calls his opponent a monster. The attacker is William, who calls everyone their trash and says it's not worth saving them. He then puts the stolen badges in his pocket, which is already completely full. Number 1 glares at one of the students and warns that next time, he won't be so lucky. Student number 430 grits his teeth in anger and frustration. The boy thinks that even with all of Group E attacking, they couldn't defeat him. The group's leader feels hopeless, as he knew they didn't stand a chance from the beginning. He was forced to be the leader, and now doesn't know what to do to protect his team. His companions ask what they should do, and think this is the end of the line for them. Trying to cheer up the group, the leader yells for everyone to pull themselves together and go find food. He suggests they hide and wait for an opportunity, but his friends look terrified. The leader then gets confused and asks why they have those scared looks on their faces. Suddenly, a giant bear appears behind the boy, and everyone thinks they're about to become food. In this moment of desperation, a mysterious figure steps onto the ground with a red aura. Our protagonist appears out of nowhere and leaps to attack the bear that was threatening the students. The The giant bear growls in anger, surprised by the attack from the young man who appeared. With a direct hit, the boy strikes the beast's head with all his might. At this, the leader of Group E is shocked to recognize the person who saved them. With just one blow, the protagonist knocks down the bear, which is now unconscious. The group of students recognizes the boy and wonders if he is number 25. He stands on top of the defeated creature while the students stare at him. With his weapon in hand, the young man faces the group he just saved from danger. The leader of Group E fills with anger and asks what else he wants to take from them. He then yells that the bear was their food for the next few days. Unconcerned, the blonde boy approaches and asks if everyone there is okay. The leader is completely confused by the unexpected question from his savior. Calmly, the golden-haired youth repeats that he just wants to know if they're okay. The boy says he's not hurt, and the blonde boy turns to leave without another word. He explains that he only came to help because the situation looked very dangerous. The blonde boy says his goal is to train and that he can get his own food. With that, he turns and walks away, saying he would choose his opponents carefully. The leader thinks about how the boy became number 25 so quickly. With a sense of gratitude, he admits that he now owes the young blonde boy one. Thanks to him, the leader and his group managed to avoid elimination from the training. But the boy says that wasn't his intention and continues on his way through the forest. Suddenly, the students hear a strange noise coming from the woods and are on alert. From the shadows emerges a giant creature with glowing blue eyes and blue fur. The giant wolf is carrying the number 3 girl, who is unconscious, in its mouth. As the group panics, the blonde boy calmly tells the giant beast to sit. The animal obeys at once and sets the girl down on the ground without hurting her. The leader of Group E is surprised to see that the girl is the famous number 3. He worries about her condition, but knows her badge can save her. Even though it looks like a cute pup, the beast is still terrifying to the students. The protagonist notices her injuries are serious and thinks about who did this. He wonders if it was a monster or perhaps numbers 1 or 2 who were responsible. The golden-haired boy turns to the group and asks if they don't want to be eliminated. He then offers the bear as food in exchange for not taking their badges. With the deal made, the protagonist advises the group not to get too attached to their numbers. He then says goodbye and leaves with his giant wolf and the unconscious girl. The leader of Group E thinks that maybe number 25 is actually a good person. Later, the blue-haired girl wakes up in a makeshift bed in the cave. She gets up, confused, and wonders where she is and how she got to that place. The young woman notices her arm has been bandaged and questions who treated her. Suddenly, she hears a voice and sees the golden-haired boy at the cave entrance. Before he can say anything, the girl attacks him with a powerful kick in the air. The boy defends himself from the attack and says her leg seems to be fine. Angrily, the blue-haired girl yells at him to give back her badge immediately. The young man is confused, as he doesn't remember taking the girl's badge. He then looks at his chest and realizes he took it by accident during the confusion. The girl runs toward the boy to forcefully take her badge back. She thanks him for saving her but warns that she won't hand over her badge. The blonde boy invites her to eat and says he had no intention of taking anything. He then tells her not to be shy, as there is plenty of food for both of them. While eating, the boy asks about the girl's injuries and what happened. He questions if she encountered monsters, but the young woman denies it with her mouth full. She reveals that her group was ambushed right after setting up their base in the forest. They were completely defeated and didn't have a chance to really fight. As the leader, she feels ashamed for not being able to do anything to help. The boy says that fighting against numbers is different and that they lack experience. With that, he says that preemptive strikes and ambushes are a way to win. The protagonist then asks if it was number 1 who hurt her arm. The girl confirms it and says he's on a whole different level. She gets annoyed remembering she didn't even get a chance to fight properly in the ambush. The girl says there's no excuse for her squad's lack of strength. The blonde boy smiles and thinks that her fighting spirit hasn't disappeared with defeat. The boy thinks the young woman has the potential to become a great warrior. He analyzes the situation and says that at this rate, The other squads will soon fall. The girl thinks of an alliance, but the blonde boy says the winning team's morale is higher. But the protagonist knows that number 1 would be prepared for an ambush. At this, the boy says the way is to attack their weak point, and the girl questions what that would be. The blonde boy reveals the strategy is to focus all attacks only on number 1. He explains that the entire team revolves around him like a pillar of support, and the moment that pillar is broken, the team will become a total mess. Without their leader, the rest of the group becomes a disorganized and easy-to-beat mob. The girl comments that he wants revenge against the rival leader, and the boy confirms it at once. With a determined look, the young man asks the girl to just trust him. The blue-haired young woman remains silent for a moment, thinking about his proposal. Then, with a smile, she asks if she should start calling him squad leader. Elsewhere, Squad A walks through the forest, and their leader complains about the delay. Number 1 tells his companion not to be impatient, as time is on their side. His colleague comments that the results of the battle will be seen very soon. Suddenly, the leader of Squad A senses a presence and becomes alert. He raises his hand and orders everyone to stop and prepare for combat. The entire group stops walking immediately and gets into position for the fight that's about to start. The young man says it's wise to know your limits, but that it would be better to surrender. Then the leader yells for his enemies to stop hiding and show themselves. The alliance emerges from the bushes, and one of them is surprised they were noticed. The group led by Leonard faces Squad A, ready for battle. The protagonist says the lion has a better sense of smell than he was expecting. Beside number 1, a girl smiles, and he says that maybe it's the nose of a dog. The girl says that those at the top can easily read the thoughts of the weaker ones. The enemy leader gets annoyed that someone like Leonard dares to stand in his way. The girl stares at him with a wicked smile and calls him a stain on the Cardenas family. Leonard asks if she enjoys acting arrogant and compares her to a peacock. Number 1 gets irritated and says that it's dignity, calling Leonard incompetent. Filled with rage, he attacks with a powerful and swift strike of his sword. His strike hits the ground with full force and opens a large crater in the earth. Then, the 2 squads charge forward, and the great battle finally begins. Then the alliance gathers and charges to attack Squad A with everything they've got. On the other side, the enemy leader prepares and orders everyone to reinforce their defense. At the signal, the 2 groups clash, and a huge battle begins in the woods. At that moment, number 2 remembers her fight against the leader of Squad A. She recalls that his strikes were so fast and heavy she could barely see them. The girl wondered what kind of monster he was to have so much strength. Even with another apprentice helping her, they were no match for that opponent. Number 1 stopped her companion's attack with just one of his hands. Mockingly, he asked if those tricks were all they could do. Then the leader of Group A simply threw the young man into the air effortlessly and finished the boy off with a powerful blow that took him out of the fight instantly. Taking advantage of the distraction, number 2 saw an opening and charged from behind. She thought he wouldn't defend, but the young man anticipated her muscle movements. Suddenly, the young woman found the opening to be too large and realized it was a trap. He had been waiting for this from the beginning to catch her by surprise. With a swift turn, the leader of Squad A spins around to intercept the attack. He uses his incredible speed to catch her off guard and land the blow. The young man says she was better than number 4, but she was slow to realize it. He explains that her eyes, which predict movements, weren't perfect, and finishes by saying her movements are slow, unlike number 25's. The flashback ends with number 1 defeating the girl with a powerful blow. Already on the ground, the girl hears the young man say she wasn't much of a challenge. He then tells number 2 to admit her defeat, because she can't win. With an air of superiority, the group leader declares himself the winner of the training. But suddenly, a voice says that's a hasty conclusion, surprising him. Then Leonard appears, carrying one of his unconscious companions. Number 1 becomes furious and asks what the protagonist is doing there. The young man replies that he just came to return the favor for what they did to his squad. Mockingly, the enemy leader laughs and says Leonard doesn't even have a squad. To this, the hero calmly replies that in the beginning, he really didn't have one. Number 1 is confused Not understanding what the protagonist means by that, Leonard tells him to look, and a large group of apprentices charges into combat. They were the lower-ranked students who had joined together to fight against the stronger ones. With that, the Alliance attacks Squad A with everything they've got, and the battle intensifies. One of them shouts, "This is the rebellion of those who are called useless." Elsewhere, a group celebrates because they will survive with what they've managed to get. They all raise their arms and start shouting the name of number 25, but the protagonist suddenly appears and says he's sorry to interrupt their celebration. The youths are startled by the unexpected arrival of the young man and number 3. The hero extends his hand and asks why they don't form an alliance. The group's leader refuses, saying they are weak and would only be a burden. Leonard reminds them that he already told them not to be bound by the numbers they received. He explains that the numbers are just labels, as everyone's training is the same. Even so, the young man says it's absurd, because they aren't the same as the protagonist. The hero says they also inherited the Cardana's blood and of potential, and continues by saying their strength is the same, and only a few have special traits. Then the young man uses number 3 as an example of someone who rose up through hard work, and says it also applies to him, who climbed from 381 to 25. But the boy shouts that it's no use, because they have these numbers for not being able to win. Leonard shouts back, saying their problem isn't just about strength. He says what they lack is the courage and the heart to believe in themselves. With that, he proposes an alliance so they can all defeat number 1 together. Back in the battle, Squad F charges with everything they've got for the decisive combat. The enemy group is shocked to see number 3 fighting alongside the weaker ones. The girl says she's faced him before, and that he stopped her kick with great ease. She also comments that the protagonist's movements are much more refined, and finishes by saying she didn't ally with someone weak, but with someone stronger than her. Leonard says his team is being defeated by his squad of rookies. Seeing the scene, the protagonist simply starts laughing at his rival's situation. With that, number 2 surrenders and asks to join the hero's squad. Right after, number 4 says he's going to do the same thing and gives himself up. The young man says it's better than losing to someone he can't stand. The leader of Squad A becomes completely furious with the betrayal of his allies. He yells and asks if they have no pride in being from the Cardaternes family. The hero tells him to stop being stubborn and just admit his great defeat. But the opponent glares at number 25 with a look of pure hatred. So he challenges him to a duel for the victory of everyone on the battlefield. The young man shouts that he will make him understand the huge difference in power between them. At this, the protagonist smiles, as this was his true intention from the beginning, and he prepares for the great combat, holding his sword very firmly. With a smile, he provokes him and tells his opponent to come at him with everything he's got. Watching from a distance, a group says that this is the true final battle of the training. They wonder if number 1 will win, or if the new star will turn the tables, and that they might be witnessing the birth of a new captain as the two face off. The fight begins with the two exchanging powerful blows at an incredible speed. Leonard thinks that the enemy's attacks are firm and have great destructive power. He reflects that number 2 did well to endure it, as that causes a lot of fatigue. Even so, the leader of Squad A continues his attack without hesitating for a second. The hero realizes the blows are strong, but his movements are easy to predict. At this, he prepares an attack from an unexpected angle, surprising his rival. From a distance, a bearded man watches the fight and says he's quite surprised. He wonders if number 25 figured out the rival's technique in such a short time. The man thinks that he did something that not even number 2 could do. In the fight, the protagonist realizes that the opponent doesn't just use physical strength. He then discovers that number 1's trait is psychokinesis, an invisible power. With this, the battle between them intensifies, with blue energy everywhere. The two continue to exchange blows, and the leader of Group I uses his power to the fullest. The hero defends himself from his rival's attacks with great calm and concentration. The young man thinks that a common apprentice would have lowered their guard against that treacherous attack, and that at that moment he uses psychokinesis to imbue his arm with power. It was a skill that defied common sense and allowed for a powerful attack. The leader of Squad A is shocked that the rookie was able to see his power. Next, the two clash their swords in an absurdly powerful attack. With this, the young man realizes the hero was hiding his true strength. Furious, he asks why the protagonist hid his power until now. Number 25 replies that his sword will give him the answer he's looking for. Then the emblem of the Sword Duke appears as an aura around the hero. The opponent smiles and accepts the challenge to see who is the strongest between them. Suddenly, the protagonist is surprised to see an attack coming from afar. He realizes his rival can use psychokinesis for long-range attacks. With a powerful blow, the leader of Group A opens a large crater in the ground and challenges him to show what he can really do to win the duel. Then the opponent prepares to use all his power at once. But the protagonist thinks that with his weak body, he can't draw too much attention. He holds his sword and thinks about what he can do to win this battle. With his eyes shining, the hero concentrates to use his best technique and launches a powerful energy slash that rushes quickly toward his rival. The protagonist's attack collides with the opponent's energy with full force. Watching from a distance, two students lament that they are completely broke. Meanwhile, the bearded man smiles and says the result was unexpected but very good. With the end of the fight, the field training is officially over, with everyone happy. The former number 1 says he was surprised by Squad E's performance, and is shocked that the rookie joined the weak ones to defeat Squad A. The instructor says that number 25 understood the real objective of the training. He says the result was unexpected, but very satisfying for everyone there. The man asks them to contact the main house about the coming of age ceremony. Back in the fight, the leader of Group A is impressed by the protagonist's speed, so he launches an even more powerful attack to try and hit his opponent. The blow hits a tree head on and destroys it with an absurdly large force. From the impact of the explosion, the hero is thrown far away but manages to regain his balance. Watching, the girl says she now understands why she couldn't see his power clearly. She explains that number 1 used a power that made his trait invisible. A colleague comments that even so, number 25 is dodging everything, but number 3 says he can't even get close. So it's not cowardice. Number 4 disagrees and says that it's actually the complete opposite of that. The assistant notices that the hero is slowly closing in on the enemy. The instructor confirms that he's cornering number 1 without him even realizing it, and compares him to a predator cornering its prey very calmly. The leader of Group A finally realizes the protagonist has closed the distance. Suddenly, the hero appears and attacks him, leaving the opponent surprised by his tactic. With a calm look, the protagonist says that number 1 has just lost the fight. Then he launches a golden strike that sends his rival flying with great force. Fallen on the ground and injured, the young man can't believe he was defeated by him. He refuses to accept that he lost to someone so far below him in status. A huge explosion of power is seen from a distance, scaring all the birds. Completely shocked, the young man wonders if he really lost the battle. He thinks that this isn't just a defeat, but something much worse. Suddenly, the young man has a vision of his end coming for him after his fall. The hero points his sword at his rival's neck and looks at him with a smile. Completely defeated, number 1 can only manage a faint laugh. The young man admits his defeat to number 25 while his colleagues watch. With the end of the duel, everyone sees that the protagonist is the grand winner of the fight. The instructor is surprised and says that was a very unexpected scene. The hero says he feels better now and thanks the former number 1 for everything. Not understanding, the young man asks what the protagonist means by that. He remembers his father's strict upbringing and the pressure to be the strongest, but says that all that pressure finally disappeared after this defeat. Then the young man extends his hand to his rival and says it was no big deal, with a smile. He says that was a great match between the two of them. The protagonist sighs in relief at his former opponent's attitude. With that, they shake hands, showing that they now have mutual respect for each other. Elsewhere, the instructors can't believe that number 1 really lost. Later, the hero says goodbye to his wolf, as he will be leaving the next day. The creature gets a very sad expression upon hearing the young man's news. The young man asks with a smile if the wolf is sad that he has to go. Under the full moon, he says he is too, but he needs to leave on his journey. He apologizes for having to leave his great friend behind all alone, but he promises that he will get stronger and will definitely come back for him. The wolf is happy with its owner's promise and breaks into a big smile. The hero tells him to stay strong to accompany him on his journey in the future. Then the wolf howls at the moon as it watches its friend leave for training. In a carriage, the protagonist and his rival are with their former companions. The new leader asks what they are doing there and why they are together. They explain that there was no boarding order, so they followed the leader. The former number 4 says he wants to talk to the one who went from 380, 1-to-1. The young man gets annoyed with the curiosity and asks if they think he's a scholar, but he says he needs to tell the protagonist something important too. Number 3 says he's changed, and he angrily tells her to be quiet. He warns that starting tomorrow, everyone will receive supplies based on their grades. But before that, there will be a blood awakening ceremony for all of them. The girl asks what happens when the organ awakens for battle. It's explained that they will be able to manipulate mana with much more freedom. Then there's talk of joining the order of the Young Dragon Knights. Leonard comments that he's never heard of this order of the Young Knights. His rival explains that it's an elite group for training the new generation. The hero asks if the organs are different for each person, and he confirms it. And it's said that they are actually called mana cores and vary quite a bit. The blue-haired girl says that Cardina's blood is dragon blood in it. The young man explains that the fewer cores, the better, and that a single core is the best. With great pride, he says he is a single core wielder without a doubt. The girl says not to take it seriously, as that only appears once every 10 years. The hero remembers doing similar training in his past life with the elements. A colleague explains that a penta core has the worst training efficiency of all, and that for each extra core, double the resources are needed for training. The illustration shows that a dual core needs 4 times more resources, and that a quintuple core needs 25 times more than normal. The protagonist wonders if his rival didn't learn this in theory class. The girl says that if you're strong in a fight, you don't need any theory. The hero wonders if a penta core wouldn't be the strongest if they trained everything. Number 4 says that in theory, yes, but getting the resources is impossible. The others say that having more cores is a disadvantage and are content with 3. But then it's revealed that the protagonist actually has a penta core. He thinks that he stood out for the wrong reasons, and that it wasn't because of his lineage. The young man stands alone in a large and completely empty hall. With his hand on his head, he thinks that he didn't want things to turn out this way. Suddenly, the young man's eyes glow, and he gets ready for action. Next, he moves with incredible speed through the large hall. Off-screen, a voice says that what he did was impressive. A hand with green energy says, "It's good to see such an attack from someone so young." Then Commander Fabian of the Order of the Young Dragon Knights appears. The protagonist introduces himself, and the commander acknowledges his great achievement. Fabian is surprised that he reached this level without even using his aura. The young man asks if martial arts aren't built with the heart and body, and says that aura has nothing to do with the completion of martial arts. At this, the commander starts laughing hard and puts a hand on his shoulder. He says the rumors weren't fair and that he liked the young man's attitude. Fabian introduces himself as a sword master and promises something in his name. He guarantees the young man will receive the best treatment due to his special status. His colleague questions him, as the hero has a very rare pentacore, but the commander furiously shouts that the core count doesn't matter, and tells his subordinate that if there's talent, they must invest fully. With that, the young man receives a spatial pouch to use whenever he needs. Fabian says that as part of the treatment, he will be able to choose his training. Behind them, several doors lead to different training locations. The commander says he will give him the right to choose instead of deciding for him. At this, Leonard asks which location has the best resources for his level. Fabian praises the question and says that a martial artist doesn't avoid danger. Then he points to a large door and sends him to Calabogaw's island. The map shows that this is the most remote and dangerous island in the entire empire. The place is described as an untamed jungle, where even veterans give up. Furthermore, certain areas are so dangerous they are like enemy territory, and a large, monstrous creature appears to show the danger of the place. The young man thanks him for the consideration and prepares to enter the portal. He thinks that core training is difficult because no one knows the method, and that if he can raise the 5 elements together, he will be very powerful. With a smile, he sees the chance to surpass his past life with this training. With the backpack already on, the protagonist enters the portal to the island. Upon arriving, the bright light blinds him for a moment, and he shields his eyes. He finds himself in a dense forest and realizes he has arrived at Calabagos. As he observes the place, a mysterious voice welcomes him. The hero is startled by a man who appears out of nowhere and questions him about his fame. He grips the young man's shoulder and repeats the question about him being the rumored apprentice. The young man bows politely and introduces himself to the man as Leonard. The knight then introduces himself as Bradley, the manager of Calabagos and a senior knight. Then Bradley calls him over and asks if he has met the others yet. He explains that everyone there are apprentices, but Leonard must respect the seniors. Bradley also warns that there's a rule prohibiting veterans from bothering the rookies. The training plan is simply half a year of protection, and after that, the rest is on your own. Normally, the veteran wouldn't bother with shelter, but he'll give the young man a place. With that, the knight shows him a simple room, and the protagonist thanks him for the help. But Bradley warns that for the rest, the young man needs to get by using spirit stones. With a smile, the knight asks if the hero has any questions about the training. So Leonard asks about the difference between the protection and training periods. The man explains that in the first, he supports everything, and in the second, he only protects from attacks. The young man asks about the combat rules, and Bradley says taking lives is forbidden. Finally, he asks the veteran to evaluate the training resources he received. The knight is shocked to see 3,000 spirit stones and 100 elixirs for each attribute. He thinks that not even the main lineage gets that much, and that the commander must have taken a liking to the young man. The hero asks what a spirit stone is, and finds out it's an ore containing mana. The young man calculates that with this, he can reach the 5th stage and asks what that is. Bradley says he will explain and will teach him how to identify a cultivator's realms. It's explained that there are 5 major realms, with 10 minor realms within each one. The first is the body-tempering realm, where mana is used to expand the core. The second is the external power realm, where the tempered mana transforms into aura. The third is transcendence, which refines each warrior's individuality. The fourth is the demigod realm, where the mind transcends and affects the physical world. In the fifth, the warrior finally transcends humanity and achieves divinity. An illustration shows a warrior in the divine realm fighting against a giant dragon. The knight explains that only the first Cardana's ancestor managed to reach this level. He gets furious with the fools who say it's a lie, because Cardana's saved everyone. With the explanation over, Bradley says it's time to start the training in earnest. He tells the young man to use the resources to temper his attributes and expand his core. With a smile, the veteran says it's a simple exercise of absorbing the energy from the stones. The hero picks up a stone and wonders if absorption will be difficult with so much mana in the air. With a determined look, the young man prepares to begin his cultivation training. Later, under the full moon, the protagonist realizes something is very strange. Looking at his hand full of power, he wonders if it should be this fast, even for someone experienced. The young man realizes he reached the 3rd stage in hours and would reach the 5th in a day. Because of his past memories, the protagonist finds this training quite easy, but to avoid raising suspicion, he decides to train in isolation for a few days in the mountains. Then, he remembers that the commander of the knights believes he is a genius without equal. With a smile, he decides to master his old techniques to maintain the genius narrative. Meanwhile, 3 other apprentices watch him, hidden among the forest trees. One of them comments that it's impressive the rookie has been locked up in there for a month and a half. A colleague says he must be trying to reach the 5th stage to survive here. So they decide to go fishing, as they don't have time to worry about the rookie. One of the guys complains that if they don't catch anything, they'll have to use their spirit stones. One of them complains about the comparison and says they should be at an orc's level at least. The scene focuses on the cabin door where the protagonist is training intensely. Suddenly, the door opens and the protagonist finally comes out of the cabin with dirty clothes. He wonders if he should ask Bradley for a real sword. The knight's voice echoes, asking if the young man really wants a real sword. The young man explains that he needs to get used to a real weapon, not a wooden one. In his thoughts, the hero imagines the veteran thinks he's arrogant for being stronger. Suddenly, the protagonist unleashes his power and shatters several rocks around them. The veteran knight is visibly impressed with the young man's demonstration of power. He comments that the young man reached the 3rd stage of the penta core in just 1 month. Even impressed, the man says that is a very incredible growth rate, but he warns the apprentice not to get carried away and unleashes a powerful red aura. The hero is completely shocked by the pressure and realizes he can't move. Bradley tells him not to be alarmed and throws a sword to the protagonist. The veteran warns him not to do anything reckless, and the young man thanks him for the help. Then the knight warns that if he loses the weapon, he'll have to compensate with stones. The young man asks what if the sword breaks, and Bradley says he'll pay with stones for that too. With that, the knight says goodbye and wishes the apprentice good luck in his training. Now with a sword in hand, the protagonist looks at a map to decide his destination. He sees a place marked with a skull and decides to go there to investigate. The hero then heads to the Forest of Remnants, which is full of monsters. Arriving at the forest, the place looks desolate and lifeless, with many dry trees. He finds several E2 rank hobgoblins that seem very weak and clumsy. One of the creatures smells blood in the air and becomes alert to the danger. The protagonist appears and says that no matter how they hide, the scent won't disappear. With firm steps, the hero advances toward the monsters for the imminent combat. He promises a painless end and attacks the hobgoblins with impressive speed. Upon being defeated, the monsters dissolve and leave behind a spirit stone. The young man picks up the stone, and it's explained that they release their mana into them when they are eliminated. He calculates he can get 100 stones a day, but doesn't expect more than that. The forest is a home for weak monsters eliminated from the food chain. Suddenly, the protagonist stops and gets a very serious expression on his face. He smells a different scent in the air and wonders if that is the presence of a gnoll. With a firm hand on his sword, the hero prepares to face a stronger enemy. The young man realizes the creature isn't even trying to hide and is treating him like easy prey. With a smile, the young man prepares himself, realizing he's being underestimated. With his eyes glowing, he taunts the monster and calls it to battle without fear. Suddenly, a swift creature emerges from the darkness and charges to attack the hero. The monster reveals itself to be a giant gnoll, growling furiously at the protagonist. With a powerful blow, the young man sends the creature flying, which screams in pain and rage. He holds his sword firmly and prepares for the enemy's next move. The hero glares at the fallen gnoll on the ground and tells the wretched dog to stop screaming. Even injured, the creature growls at the protagonist, showing it can still fight. The hero is impressed by the creature's power just from changing the attack's path. So he decides to absorb the power of all the monsters there to get stronger. The creature shows off its muscles and prepares for a full-force attack. The young man realizes this is different from the information he had about gnolls. It's explained that a normal goblin evolves into an E2 rank hobgoblin, and that a common gnoll is considered a D1 rank creature in the system. The protagonist knows that monster evolution usually ends after 1 stage, but he realizes that creature doesn't even seem to be a D2 rank. Then it's revealed to be a much more powerful D3 rank adnol. The hero and the creature face off, and he says he'll have a good training session after so long. With a roar, the monster launches a savage attack with blue energy at the young man. The protagonist says with confidence that a savage attack like that will never be able to hit him, and he easily dodges the enemy's blow. He counterattacks with a powerful kick, but the blow doesn't have much effect. The young man is surprised by the hardness of the monster's body which even gives off sparks. Angrily, the Agnol attacks again with its axe, using a red aura. The blow is so strong that the creature's weapon ends up stuck in the ground. The hero sees the perfect chance to attack while the monster's axe is stuck. He tries a slash with his sword, but the creature doesn't seem to feel anything. The young man realizes the enemy's muscles and bones are extremely tough, but he finds a weak spot that can't be protected by the monster. With a precise punch, the protagonist hits the Agnol's throat with full force. After the battle, the forest falls silent again with the creature's defeat. The hero is surprised to see the result of the fight and what the monster left behind. He finds a medium-grade spirit stone, which is worth 100 normal stones. The young man thinks that fighting creatures like this will make his energy grow faster. Now he understands why the apprentices don't even get close to that place. Back in his cabin, a bright light shines through the wooden door. The protagonist meditates, surrounded by a blue aura, and concentrates his energy. He realizes things are going well, as he has already reached the 10th stage of tempering. He thinks that if a penta-core reaches stage 10 in months, it will be a problem. Outside, one of the veterans gets worried and thinks something happened to the rookie. They comment that 3 months have passed, and the young man hasn't come out once. A colleague complains and asks if they really need to check on the guy every day. The leader explains that they need to be the first good veterans to form a connection. He says that a single strong connection is worth more than several ties with weak families. And most importantly, he is number one, and even the commander is keeping an eye on him. So the leader pushes his colleague Hayden and tells him to go greet the rookie. With a bucket of fish, Hayden asks if the guy is alive because he needs to eat. Without a response, he peeks and wonders if the rookie is gone, as there's no sound. Inside, the protagonist realizes they are good veterans, and we're just checking on him. He thinks he managed to see the face of the guy who tried to peek through the crack. The veteran thinks that Leonard's results would draw attention, but his wouldn't. So the hero decides to try an old technique he hasn't used in a long time. With his hands on his face, the young man begins to concentrate to start his transformation. He uses the art of reverse utilization to manipulate his facial muscles and disguise himself. With the technique, the hero begins to completely change his face and appearance. The young man regrets having to use his power to hide from the other apprentices. After the change, he decides to assume Hayden's identity to avoid being noticed. Completely transformed, he says he'll take good care of that face for a while. 3 months later, the protagonist is in the swamp of the Bone Mountain. He thinks about the most important survival rule he has learned so far. The rule is that there's no one else around, and every creature he encounters has poison and can hide, so he needs to move very carefully. If he lets his guard down, he'll be devoured by a lizard man lurking in the swamp. He knows the monsters are C rank and attack in groups to finish the fight quickly. With his foot firm on a log, the young man prepares to jump and attack the creature. Then he leaps toward the monster, which roars furiously upon seeing him approach. With a powerful and precise blow, the young man hits the creature's head with full force. After the battle, the hero stands over the defeated monster with his sword in hand. He realizes he made a lot of noise and ended up waking the swamp's boss. With that, a giant creature emerges from the water with a huge club in its hands. The monster roars furiously and prepares to attack the young man with everything it's got. But the hero notices that despite being fast, the boss's movements are simple. He says he has no time to play with someone untrained and defeats it. After the battle, the boss leaves behind a very large and colorful spirit stone. The young man already has 1,200 stones and decides it's time to move on. The amount of mana in the stones is more than enough for the next stage. He thinks that breaking through the limit here on the island will be hard to hide. With his power growing so much, he worries about how he will keep it a secret. So the young man begins to walk through the forest in search of a safe place. He needs a place to suppress the mana explosion and take shelter from danger. With focused eyes, he continues his search for an isolated training spot. Suddenly, he finds a field of glowing herbs and a person tending to them. The hero is surprised by so many herbs with absorption greater than the stones. He wonders if the guardian of the cave A troll is taking care of the herbs. The creature with huge tusks growls as it senses the presence of an intruder nearby. Sitting on a rock, the protagonist notices that something is approaching quickly. Then the troll stands up and releases a powerful green aura that intimidates anyone. Suddenly, a lycanthrope appears and faces the troll in a tense and fierce confrontation. With auras of power, the two monsters charge at each other with everything they've got. The protagonist watches the scene and wonders if this is a territorial dispute. He is shocked to see that the monsters can use the power of nature in the fight. The troll manipulates the earth and rocks, something that would be difficult even for the hero. But the lycanthrope dodges everything with the speed of a swift lightning bolt. The battle between the two creatures continues with a very intense exchange of blows. The two roar at each other as their powers clash with full force. The hero realizes that this battle won't be resolved easily. Hidden, he decides to wait for the end of the fight to act safely. He sees a chance to explore the cave while the two monsters are busy. He thinks that if a strong troll is guarding the place, there must be an incredible treasure inside. Upon entering, he notices he can no longer hear anything from outside, and the place is perfect for training. The young man wonders what this place is as he looks at something impressive. He then comes face to face with a giant golden tree that glows intensely. The young man sees spiritual herbs and questions if the troll was cultivating them there, but he finds it strange that he didn't feel the plant's energy from outside the cave. With that, the hero extends his hand and uses his mana to sense what is happening. His energy then hits a barrier with a honeycomb pattern that was protecting the area. With a smile, he understands that this barrier is what was protecting the entire place. The young man looks at the golden tree and finds it all bizarre, wondering what it is. He touches one of the leaves and says he's heard of herbs, but never a tree like this. The hero believes it is of a high grade, and the troll didn't even know what it was guarding. He then decides he wants to use the power of that place to finally evolve. But suddenly, the young man senses a presence and realizes he has company in the cave. At that moment, a blue energy is hurled rapidly toward the giant creature. The protagonist dodges and realizes he didn't notice the monster because of the mana and sound barrier. Fortunately for the young man, the creature seems to be very irritated about something, and besides that, its wounds from the previous battle have not yet fully healed. Angrily, the troll smashes the ground and launches several pieces of rock toward the hero. The protagonist leaps with agility to dodge the creature's powerful attack. The rocks block the cave entrance, and he understands that the monster wants to trap him. With a smirk, the young man unleashes his blue aura, preparing for combat. He says that's fine by him, and that he accepts the challenge of that enormous creature. With the cave entrance now blocked, there is no escape route for him. From the outside, it's possible to see that the passage is completely sealed by the rocks. Back in the fight, the hero realizes the creature gains speed after a few blows. The monster then begins to throw more rocks in a reckless and savage manner. The young man dodges a giant rock and knows that a single hit would be fatal for him. He readies his sword and realizes his opponent is much smarter than he looked. With a focused gaze, he decides that in this case, he will have to use a different approach. The young man charges forward with his sword glowing blue and black for a final attack. He then declares that he will settle the fight with just one decisive blow. But suddenly, the lycanthrope appears and stops the blow, calling the troll Garu. The young man is shocked as his blade was stopped by the other monster that arrived. The young man understands that the troll was protected by the earth and the rocks around it. At that moment, the troll releases an aura of fire and prepares to counter-attack. With a punch to the ground, the creature launches a wave of flames toward the boy. The monster's fist, covered in fire, hits the ground with incredible force. The hero jumps back and understands why the lycanthropes were defeated before. He realizes that the troll was a dual-element user from the beginning. With red eyes, the creature glares at the hero with great fury and lets out a roar. The monster charges, and the young man realizes that distance won't solve the problem. He runs through the cave and thinks he'll be melted if he touches those flames. The young man then decides he needs to find an opening for a precise strike. With that, He uses a technique similar to the dragon's embrace to propel himself. Seeing the troll take a step, the protagonist sees the perfect opportunity to attack. In the blink of an eye, the young man rushes at high speed toward his enemy. He manages to get close enough to strike the monster's body. Upon landing the blow, the protagonist feels a nostalgic and familiar sensation. With its body pierced, the troll seems defeated, and the hero says it's the end. The creature is thrown backward by the force of the powerful blow's impact. The hero is also propelled by his own attack and flies across the cave. He then lands safely near the monster, which is falling weakly. In a swift move, the young man plunges his mana sword into the troll's chest. The sword's energy passes through the monster's body and out of its mouth. He believes the fight is over since he pierced his enemy's chest, but suddenly, the young man gets a shocked expression on his face. He sees a strange light coming from the wound in the troll's chest. From inside the monster's body comes a giant, pink-colored spirit stone. Without warning, the stone erupts in a massive explosion of light and energy. The spirit stone's explosion spreads throughout the entire cave with full force. With that, a wave of fire and smoke consumes everything around it in seconds. The young man knows that if he's caught in that explosion, he has no way to survive. He is then thrown with force by the shockwave coming toward him. With that, the hero ends up hitting his back hard against the golden tree. Injured, he thinks the impact might have broken all the bones in his body. He knows that in less than 5 minutes, the entire cave will be in flames. And because of the barrier at the entrance, he can't expect any help. The young man then decides that no matter what happens, he will survive in there. He heard that upon evolving, the body recovers, and there's no more time to hesitate. With determination, the young man decides he will use the stones to heal himself completely. He feels the mana from the spirit stones entering his injured organs. Thus, 1,500 spirit stones begin to heal his body from the inside. But the hero realizes that the stones alone will not be enough to save him, so he decides he needs to absorb all the spiritual herbs in the place. Without a second thought, the young man begins to eat the plants to strengthen himself. With the preparations complete, his mana begins to grow wildly. His core starts to spin all at once at an incredible speed. At that moment, he feels that all his energy is becoming one. He feels as if a new heart is being born inside his chest. With this, his body and mana recover, and he reaches a new level of power. But the energy doesn't stop and exceeds the power a human body can handle. The energy continues to flow, and he feels connected to the golden tree. His core mana has been integrated, and he has jumped to the 3rd stage. He thinks that his seniors have been stuck in the 2nd stage for several years. His wounds have healed, and the flow of mana in his body is faster. The young man can't believe that crossing a boundary made him grow so much. He wonders how he survived such a powerful explosion in an enclosed space. With that, the hero notices something he hadn't seen on the golden tree before. Hanging from a branch, he finds a small orb that shines brightly. He holds the orb and says the bright light left only one fruit behind. The spiritual energy of that item must have protected him from the fire explosion. The young man holds the blue fruit and feels that it seems natural in his hand. He wonders if the item managed to absorb all the mana released before. The hero decides to plant the seed, as the object saved his life in a way. With this in mind, he starts running to finally get out of that place. The young man knows he needs to get back quickly to avoid raising any suspicion. Using his new strength, he shatters the rocks that were blocking the cave's exit. He then leaps out of the cave at high speed and with great power. The protagonist realizes he overdid it a bit as he became too strong. From a distance, he spots his cabin and hopes he hasn't drawn too much attention. He arrives back just in time, wearing a coat made of monster hide. The young man thinks that explaining his appearance would be a problem and decides to tidy up. He then notices the veterans approaching, as he has been training with them for 3 months. One of the veterans points and says that the rookie's cabin door is open. A senior named Ann introduces himself and tells the young man to call him Veteran. The hero returns to his original form and introduces himself to the group as Leonard. Ann says he's stagnated in swordsmanship and invites him for a little training match. The protagonist accepts the challenge, leaving the senior a bit surprised. The veteran then tells him to follow, as he will show him what it means to be a knight. With a confident look, he thinks he now has the advantage in the situation. Suddenly, En finds himself floating in the air and wonders why he's floating. Next, another veteran named Gale is also defeated and gives up on the ground. Then a strong impact occurs between two wooden swords in the training session. The last veteran now faces the protagonist in a very intense sword fight. The senior gets irritated and wonders how a rookie has this level of skill. With a sweaty face, he seems to be in a very complicated situation in the fight. The two then clash again with their wooden weapons with full force. The veteran uses his fire aura to increase the power of his wooden sword. His weapon is engulfed in flames, and he prepares for the next attack. A veteran yells at Hayden for using mana, and the protagonist gets scared. His colleagues run over and ask if Leonard is okay, but he says he is, with an injured hand. The young man apologizes and says he used a defense technique out of instinct. With a bleeding hand, he notes that even blocking a sword with mana causes damage. With a smile, the hero realizes that swordsmanship isn't everything in this world. The veteran asks why he isn't angry, and the young man says he has a lot to learn. He holds the wooden sword and says he's looking forward to the next sessions. With a smile, he points the weapon and says training with them is going to be fun. The veterans get excited, and Anne invites him to come to their cabin every day. Later that night, someone knocks on the door of the protagonist's lodge. It's Ein, already in his armor, and he says that tonight's session has been canceled. The hero asks what happened and notices their equipment is different. The veteran explains that there was an explosion in the swamp of the Bone Mountain. He continues, saying that a lycanthrope and a troll had a territory dispute. At this, what's left of the two monsters who fought to the end is shown. Because of this, knights were sent out as weak monsters invaded the place. Ian says they are going to clean up the mess as part of their training and tells the young man to rest. But before leaving, the veteran says he has something for the newcomer. He throws 5 swords on the ground and says the young man must have broken many while training. The protagonist thanks him, and Ain asks not to be forgotten when he becomes famous. As he walks away, the veteran tells him to be careful because most of the knights are out. The hero thanks him and thinks the commotion must have been big to move the entire order of knights. He then realizes this is the perfect chance, as everyone's attention has been diverted. Wearing a hood, he thinks he can move more boldly now that he's alone. The young man knows that if he appears as Leonard, it will create a new wave of confusion. For that reason, he decides to use the lycanthrope's hide to disguise himself and not be noticed. With everyone in the same place, he can move freely and sees a unique opportunity. He heads to the opposite side of the training ground and says it's time to explore the plain. The hero walks across the plain and notices that the place is very quiet and strange. He feels a gaze full of anger, but wonders why the enemy doesn't attack him. The young man doesn't know if they're cautious or cowardly, but this is a waste of time. Suddenly, a giant creature appears from the skies and rushes forward at high speed. The creature reveals itself to be an old-bear and flies towards the protagonist with everything it's got. With a calm look, he identifies the monster and calls it his first challenger. The young man says a creature of this level is perfect for testing his skills. Elsewhere, a voice says they've finally arrived on the island of Calabagos. A group of hooded men notices that 2 of their companions have been lost. They fell into the sea, and one of the men mourns for his country, called Kyrgyz. The group's leader is the 5th shadow of Kyrgyz, and seems very annoyed by this. He orders everyone to complete the mission and not let the passings be in vain. The mission is to capture a Cardena's apprentice, to discover the secret of their blood. They are ordered to show no mercy, as the Cardenas are the root of all evil. The scene returns to the desolate plain, where the group is searching for the target. One of the Shadow Knights runs through the desert at high speed for the mission. Suddenly, he realizes he got separated from his group during the search for the target. The knight complains about the number of rank of monsters on that island. He wonders what the Cardenas fiends are doing in a place like this, but he notices that since he entered the plain, no more strong monsters have appeared. The map indicates that the strongest monsters are in the center, which is very strange. Suddenly, he finds an old bear and says he can defeat it easily. With his sword in hand, the knight charges towards the monster for combat. But as he gets closer, he realizes the creature has already been defeated on the ground. With his foot on the monster, he wonders who else could be in this place. Completely confused, the Shadow Knight looks around, searching for answers. Then he sees more defeated creatures and is astonished by the fighter's skill. Suddenly, a rock is thrown at high speed towards the knight. He manages to defend himself with his sword and yells, asking who's there. Just then, the protagonist appears and says that's actually his line. The Shadow Knight is startled to see the young man appear out of nowhere in the desert. The hero stares at the man and asks who he really is with a serious look. Then the protagonist says if he won't talk, he'll find out for himself. The knight tries to answer, but his voice won't come out, and he becomes desperate. Angrily, he grips his sword and envelopes it in a powerful fiery aura. He then charges forward and attacks the young man with a strike full of power and hatred. The young man notices the blade is full of anger and that his opponent won't back down. With his own blue aura, the protagonist easily defends against the attack. The knight can't believe his powerful strike was blocked by a mere boy. The Shadow Man then rushes forward to continue his swift attack. Suddenly, other knights appear and attack the hero all at once. With that, a great confrontation begins, with both sides trading blows. The protagonist notices the blow was shallow and wonders if something blocked it. Suddenly, he releases a golden snake-shaped aura to counterattack. The young man thinks he didn't want to use this technique, but now he has no other choice. He says the enemy's technique is cunning and dangerous, like a venomous snake, but he criticizes his opponent, saying the path of his sword is too obvious. With a smile, he asks if the knight has only ever faced weak enemies. The Shadow Knight becomes tense and starts to sweat from the pressure of the fight. Suddenly, the protagonist finds himself trapped by purple mana chains from all sides. The knight feels bad for him, but is shocked to see him drop his sword on the ground. He can't believe the boy just threw his weapon away in the middle of the fight like that. The Shadow Knight wonders why the young man would do something so reckless. The young man taunts him, asking if he thought he'd be defenseless without his weapon. With a powerful punch, the protagonist shatters all the mana chains at once. The knight wonders if the young man has awakened the power of his cursed blood. The scene changes to night, and the full moon shines brightly in the dark sky. Now at night, someone walks slowly through the forest with silent steps. It's the protagonist, asking the tied-up knight if he understands the situation. Angrily, the Shadow Knight yells and calls the protagonist a coward. The knight yells in anger, calling the hero a filthy fiend of the Cardenas family. The young man is a bit confused by all the prisoner's anger and yelling. He points to the enemy's weapon and calls him a fool for using a magical artifact. The Shadow Man yells that there's no such thing as a dirty fight against someone from the Cardenas family. With that, the hero punches the knight in the face, who looks very surprised. With a swollen face, the man yells and tells the protagonist to just finish him off already. The young man says his life is in his hands, and he has no right to ask for anything. The knight refuses to talk and calls him a scoundrel who inherited impure blood. The hero wonders if he's talking about the Cardenas family bloodline. The man says he can't deny the sins that run in his blood. He reveals that the Cardenas are not human and are considered an abomination. With a smile, the young man says the knight knows a lot of interesting things. Then the man yells and asks what the great secret of the Cardenas bloodline is, and why there are no branch families outside the country if they have nothing to hide. The protagonist becomes thoughtful, with a slightly sad expression on his face. The hero asks if the Cardenas' power is so envied that they would resort to kidnapping someone. He says that even if they discover the secret, nothing will change for the people of the frontier. Then the young man stares at him and asks if he can face his ancestors like this. The knight gets furious at the provocation and yells at the young man not to be arrogant. Calmly, the hero reveals that the knight came from the kingdom of Cruises, shocking him. He says that when the mind is troubled, even the obvious is easily forgotten. The Shadow Knight is completely shocked by the young man's revelation The young man says that before he passes, the man will confess everything he knows to him. It's explained that Cruises is a small kingdom in the western part of the continent. The place was known as the Holy Land of Knights a few centuries ago, but everything changed when the Cardenas family finally appeared on the map. The Knights of Cruises were defeated, and the kingdom was forgotten by the world. The young man asks if they attacked Cardenas to regain their lost fame. He thinks they tried to uncover the secrets of his bloodline and becomes interested. But the biggest problem is that transcendent level warriors have arrived on the island. With this, the young man decides he needs to inform Mr. Bradley about the situation. Then, a powerful blue energy envelopes his sword, preparing for an attack. He says the enemy is the Shadow Knights of the Kingdom of Cruises and prepares himself. The young man thinks the situation is too heavy for the apprentices to handle alone. He asks the enemy if he called himself the 30th Shadow and attacks him. After finishing off the knight, he says there's no time to explain in detail. The young man thinks his imitation of the technique is still at an imitation level, but he believes that will be more than enough to solve the problem. Next, the hero takes the magical tools from the knight, who fell to the ground. He throws the man's body over his shoulder and asks if he has any complaints. With firm steps, the protagonist carries the knight away from that place. The scene changes to the knight's camp, which is calm under the night sky. 3 of them celebrate their free time, as they haven't rested since the summons. Suddenly, one of the young men gets scared and calls Ein's attention to something strange. The 3 knights then look at a blue light shining in the darkness. They find a body on the ground, and one of them yells to call for Mr. Bradley. Upon arriving at the scene, the veteran is shocked by what he sees before him. He identifies the technique as an aura blade, which only a sword master uses. Then the knight finds a note and says the message seems to be true. It was a confession of guilt for attacking young and defenseless people on the island. The note spoke of the Shadow Knights from the Kingdom of Cruises and their plans, and that they are heading to the center of the island after the knight apprentices. Bradley becomes tense because the big problem is their leader, who is a transcendent. With that, he orders Anne to sound the alarm throughout the island, as it's an emergency. The knight replies yes and runs to carry out his superior's order. The scene changes to the main barracks of the knights in the middle of the night. With the alarm, all the apprentices run out and prepare for battle. They all run across the courtyard with their swords in hand for the great battle. In the middle of the crowd, the hero thinks that Mr. Bradley understood his intention. Then the veteran shouts and says, "This is not a drill for anyone there." Bradley says there are intruders on the island, and their military force is very large. He explains that there are 30 enemies at the 8th stage of external power. The veteran reminds them of Commander Fabian's power. To give an example, he says that against someone like that, the number of troops means nothing. So he asks if they will activate the gate and wait for reinforcements from the family, or if they will stay to face the enemy, and tells them all to decide quickly. The hero thinks the combat will be good experience if they survive. He knows that no one will be blamed if they choose to retreat from the coming battle. But suddenly, one of the knights shouts that he will fight with everything he's got. The others agree and say they won't go down easy because they've improved their skills. The protagonist thinks that choosing to fight in the face of danger isn't easy, and he respects them. With that, all the other apprentices shout together that they will fight until the end. All the knights gather and prepare for the great battle that is about to begin. The veteran smiles and says he will show respect for everyone's choice, but he warns that fighting a transcendent is another story and asks for reinforcements. With that, the senior knight orders everyone to prepare for the imminent combat. The hero moves away from the group and walks alone towards a cave. He thinks he didn't expect to use the hole he dug near his room so soon. The young man was evacuated as a protected target, but this was convenient for his plans. Most of the magical tools are broken, but one ring seems to be usable. He tries to use the ring's power, but feels a sharp pain in his chest. The jewel glows brightly on his finger. As he tries to understand what happened, he realizes his heart blocked the mana, and no magical tools will work. The only thing he can use is the Shadow Knight's signaling device. he thinks about launching a surprise attack and using the signal as a decoy if he's discovered. The young man knows the only one he needs to watch out for is the enemy sword master, with a focused gaze. He vows he won't let his opponent do as he pleases. Then the protagonist runs at high speed across the island to find the enemies. He picks up a signal for reinforcements and knows it can't be the Transcendent, so he decides to suppress their forces while they are still separated and moves forward. The scene takes place in a desolate location known as the Lion's Ravine. Suddenly, a large blast of purple energy destroys everything around it. With that, 2 hooded men are hit head-on by a surprise attack. Then, a rank of manticore appears and attacks the group of shadow knights. The creature launches a powerful attack with its serpent tail without hesitation. One of the knights orders them to prioritize the main force and flee from there as quickly as possible. His comrades think they can defeat the monster if reinforcements arrive in time, but a voice asks if they're talking about the comrade who has already been defeated. The hero appears in the blink of an eye and defeats 3 knights at once. One of the enemies is shocked and asks how the young man knew how to use their signal. The young man explains that he provoked the prisoner, and he ended up telling everything he knew. Filled with rage, one of the knights stares him down and calls him despicable. The protagonist says they let their emotions blind them in battle. Then the shadow man attacks for his friends, but is defeated in seconds. His comrade calls him a fool for getting carried away by anger in the trap. The hero asks if they've forgotten they were fighting the manticore. At that moment, the creature reappears and roars furiously at the knights. With its purple energy, it prepares to attack the group of shadow men. The rank of manticore has the body of a lion and a long serpent tail. The young man prepares for the fight and asks who the creature in front of him is. Then the monster surprises him by answering with the word human. The protagonist is shocked to hear a creature like that speak his language. The manticore warns him that if he fights it, he will surely perish. But the young man says he won't go down easy, and that if he has time, he will come to help him. The creature looks at the bodies and thinks the hero is too strong to be normal. It wonders if the young man mentioned, is the leader called the 5th Shadow. The sword master appears with his green aura, and the young man knows he doesn't stand a chance. Even so, he asks if he should believe a monster like that. The creature challenges him to fight if he's not afraid of meeting his end there. With a smile, the young man turns away, and the monster says it will let him go this time. The hero walks away from the place with firm, decisive steps, without looking back. But the creature attacks him from behind, calling him a foolish human for believing it. The young man was already expecting the monster's betrayal and isn't the least bit surprised. Then he uses a powerful water technique and prepares for a counter-attack. The first blow is an energy attack that hits the creature's head dead on. The manticore is startled by the power and can't believe it was hit like that. Angrily, the creature attacks with its venomous tails to finish off the young man. But the young man dodges and prepares his second blow to hit the monster's lungs. The third attack hits the heart, and he says he needs to get out of there quickly. With the battle over, the protagonist prepares to flee the dangerous place. With a focused gaze, he knows the real enemy is getting very close. Then he throws the necklace he picked up on the ground to serve as a perfect decoy. The sword master is drawn to the decoy and moves towards the object. With a large green aura, the leader of the Shadow Knights arrives at the location. He lands with full force and stops in front of the necklace shining on the ground. The Shadow Man then approaches and reaches out his hand to grab the artifact. Upon grabbing the necklace, he realizes he arrived too late and was deceived. With a serious look, the sword master senses that something is still wrong. Suddenly, he senses a presence and asks who is hiding nearby. Then the enemy leader unleashes a powerful green energy attack everywhere. Hiding, the protagonist protects himself behind a large rock to survive. He's shocked that the enemy sensed his presence even from so far away. The sword master's strike destroys everything, and the young man is thankful he dug a hole. He thinks he needs to get away from that monster and flee as fast as possible. Back on the surface, the enemy leader stops attacking and falls silent. He wonders if it was his imagination or if there was really someone else there. The man thinks his intuition is failing him because the plan went so wrong. He makes a memorial for his men and says their lives will not be in vain. With a determined look, he turns and says the objective has already been achieved. Far away, the hero's hand emerges from the rebel where he was hiding. The hero comes out of his hiding spot and leans on the ground, exhausted after the attack. As he gets up, he sees a wounded knight and realizes it's already too late. The man recognizes him as an apprentice and is surprised by his presence there. He says that 45 knights were defeated by a single sword master. The knight reveals that the 8 apprentices they were looking for have been captured. All the young people were shackled and taken as prisoners by the enemies. With his last breath, the man passes away, and the young man realizes they've already been taken. He wonders how the enemies managed to get through. They're carrying the hostages. The young man deduces that the goal was to get test subjects and that everyone is still alive. With this, he remembers the interrogation and that there was only one way to do it. It's explained that they used a mass teleport to escape with the prisoners. The young man realizes he needs to hurry because the enemies have already achieved their objective. But to move so many people, their destination must be a very large place. He asks if Mr. Bradley is pursuing them, and the man says he's in the area. The protagonist tells the knight to rest and uses his mana on his body. With that, the man is gone, and the hero helps him have a peaceful passing. He thinks that Mr. Bradley is looking in the completely wrong place. To avoid defeat, he picks up the knight's body and carries it on his back. He knows he needs to take the veteran to the location, personally to be believed. Elsewhere, the senior knight advances with his troop through the dark forest. He complains that everyone fled and threw away their pride as knights. Suddenly, he senses a presence and yells for the enemy to show themselves and fight. Just then, a body is thrown in front of the group, scaring all the apprentices. The veteran recognizes the move and wonders if it's a remnant of cruises. Then, the protagonist appears in disguise so as not to be recognized by them. He turns and starts running so the group of knights will follow him closely. The veteran orders everyone to eliminate the intruder, and the group moves forward to engage. The young man thinks the plan worked and that they are now following him. He looks back while continuing to run through the forest with agility. The hero tells himself they won't escape and leads them into the trap. The hero runs through a field of swords that emerge from the ground to catch him. With agility, he dodges all the blades and continues on his way. The disguised young man continues to flee with the veteran in pursuit. He uses one of the fallen knights as a foothold to propel himself forward. The senior knight is impressed and says he's fast for someone from cruises. The young man thinks that if he made it this far, his plan was a success. Angrily, the veteran strikes the ground and opens a large crater with his sword. Suddenly, the knight stops, a very confused expression on his face. He realizes he was so focused on the chase that he fell into a trap. The hero watches from a distance and thinks the real enemy will appear soon. At that moment, the leader of the Shadow Knights appears before him. The villain taunts him, fearlessly calling him a dog of the Cardana's family. The veteran asks if he's the mastermind behind all this confusion. Bradley orders him to surrender, but the enemy leader doesn't seem to care. Mockingly, the Shadow Man asks if he thinks they don't have a plan. He says the knight has already been defeated, and a magic circle appears on the ground. The veteran recognizes the mass teleport and tries to stop their escape. The enemy leader says he will be his opponent for 15 minutes until activation. With that, the two warriors face off, and the great battle finally begins. The sword master and the veteran trade blows at an absurd speed. Bradley seems to be at a disadvantage against the power of the transcendent opponent. From a distance, the hero watches and tells Mr. Bradley to hold on a little longer. He thinks that with both of them busy, he'll take the opportunity to rescue the knights. A large teleportation circle is seen at the enemy camp on the coast. The disguised young man arrives at the location and watches the guards from a distance. He notices they are distracted and that this is his big chance to act. Inside a tent, the young man finds all the captured apprentices. He sees that everyone's hands are bound by very strong magical shackles. With his mana, the hero uses a technique to break everyone's shackles. One of the apprentices is shocked to see his shackles breaking out of nowhere. One of the young men asks why he is helping them, and the hero responds. He says he has neither the time nor the obligation to explain anything. The apprentices look at each other, confused, but understand the urgency of the situation. One of them asks if all the knights should go, and the young man confirms. With that, all the young men bow and thank him from the bottom of their hearts. Then the group of apprentices seizes the chance and flees at high speed. Alone in the tent, he thinks the hostage problem has been solved. With a smile, he prepares for the work that still needs to be done. Holding 2 swords, he leaves the tent to face the guards. The hero launches a powerful blue energy attack at the shadow men. The blow hits the guards head-on, throwing them far away with the impact. Then the young man says it's time to take out the trash and finishes them all off. He moves forward with a smile and continues his attack without showing any mercy. The scene shows the aftermath of the young man's attack on the enemies. In the other fight, the veteran is hit by a blast of green energy. The enemy leader says he wasn't satisfied, but it was good entertainment. He says this meaningless game is over and that cruises will rise again. Suddenly, the villain senses a presence and realizes the intruder is approaching. Just then, a HUD is thrown, distracting the sword master for a moment. The hero appears out of nowhere and flies towards the 2 warriors in combat. With a clash of energy, the 2 face off in a high-level combat. Now without his mask, the young man faces the 5th shadow and calls him a disappointment. The leader can't believe the one who took out his men was just a boy. He vows to eliminate the young man to avenge his fallen comrades. Suddenly, a huge explosion of blue light illuminates the entire dark forest. On the ground, the sword master realizes he was completely deceived by the young man. A man in red armor says he used a teleport to take the young man. The commander admits he let his guard down because he thought he was the main target. Bradley laments, as he never imagined the enemy's target was Leonard. He understands that the villain saw the young man as such a great threat that he took him. The veteran remembers the apprentice, facing a sword master without hesitation. He says he's seen many knights, but never one who grew so quickly. With this, Bradley thinks that a new legend is about to be born in Cardenas. The commander orders them to call for reinforcements and leaves the next steps to his colleague. He says the Cardenas family must find that boy at all costs. Far away, the protagonist floats unconscious in the middle of the vast blue ocean. Suddenly, the hero wakes up confused, surrounded by a strange energy in the water. He looks up and is surprised to see a huge ship right in front of him. Later, the young man wakes up with a bandage on his face, feeling a little dizzy. He realizes from the smell and the rocking that he's on board a ship. Then a young woman with orange hair greets him and says he's finally awake. She says she saved his life, and so he needs to answer her questions. The young woman introduces herself as Francis, the captain of the ship Aquamarine, and asks his name. The young man says his name is Leonard, and he's from the Arcadian Empire. With that, the 2 shake hands and formally introduce themselves to each other. The captain is shocked and asks how he came from so far away. The protagonist calmly replies that it was all just an accident. He explains that he was caught in some spatial magic and doesn't remember anything else. A colleague asks if he's from the Cardenas family, since he came out of the magic unscathed. Marion analyzes the young man's body and says it would only make sense if he were a Cardenas. He's surprised that Cardenas is famous even on the other side of the sea and confirms it. The captain's colleague warns her that getting involved with him might not be a good idea. Suddenly, a sailor runs in and asks Francis to go to the docks. The man looks terrified and says a bunch of troublemakers are there. He warns that Luciano Peterson's gang is causing trouble at the docks. Marian gets furious and says they took advantage of her being in a meeting. The captain apologizes to the hero, but he understands she has her own problems. She says that as soon as he recovers, he's free to go whenever he wants. And she informs him that his clothes and his sword have been left for him on the bed. At this, the young man asks why she saved him in the first place. The captain stops at the door and turns to answer the young man's question. She says with a smile that it was because he looked like he needed help in the sea. With a steady gaze, The protagonist realizes the captain has a good heart. He understands that she's actually the one who seems to need help right now. The scene changes to the port docks where the ship Aquamarine is anchored. The captain and her companion walk towards a group of troublemakers. Their leader greets them mockingly and taunts them with a smile. Marion gets annoyed and says he didn't just come here to say a simple hello. The man gets a disgusted look on his face and doesn't like the girl's tone. He warns her that he has business with the captain and that her dog should shut its mouth. Suddenly, the protagonist appears and interrupts their conversation. He approaches and tells Marion to back off, as the conversation is between the masters. The gang leader tells her not to be stubborn and to hand over the ship Aquamarine. He says the ship is too good for inheritance of a failed family. With a cold stare, the captain stands firm in her decision and faces the man. She says she will never hand over the Aquamarine and tells him to leave. The man gets annoyed and says he offered a good price, but she made everything difficult. Suddenly, Luciano's hand is sliced off, and he screams in pain from the surprise attack. The hero asks if he can finish that guy off and leave the henchman aside. The captain is shocked and asks him to spare the gang leader's life. Luciano's men panic when they see their boss's arm on the ground. Full of rage, the man gets up and glares at the captain with pure hatred. He orders his men to finish everyone there for doing this to him. Suddenly, a blade of blue energy cuts through the air and rushes towards the group. With his two swords, the protagonist attacks all the henchmen at once. The young man manages to defend himself from the enemies, attacks with great skill, and he finishes one of them off with a powerful punch that sends him flying. The captain and her companion watch the scene. Shocked by the young man's strength, they wonder if that is the true power of the Cardenas family. With a firm step, the hero steps on the hand of one of the fallen henchmen. He sees that Luciano managed to reattach his arm and calmly faces him. The two girls stand in silence, not knowing what to say about the situation. With a calm look, the protagonist asks if there's a problem here. Francis explains that the man is the illegitimate son of the highest authority, and that the place is governed by the Council of the Atlantis Maritime Union. The city is shown as a great center of power, and the council is its ruler. The man's father is Pablo Peterson, one of the top 5 members of the Union Council. The hero thinks his opponent is more troublesome than he imagined. With that, he approaches the captain and calls her by name to talk. The young man then offers to be her bodyguard for a while. He decides he will stick around to solve problems